Welcome to Whole Health. We're happy you're here on this journey of exploration with us as we learn what it means to live a life dedicated to spiritual, mental, and physical health. Before we begin our program, we want to share a brief legal disclaimer. The information provided on this program, including any health-related advice or discussions, is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions regarding your health. Now, let's turn it over to Pastor Jeremy, Dr. Kala Kleen, and Brittany Pfeifner for today's episode of Whole Health.
Welcome back to Whole Health, and we're excited that you joined us today. Last week, we spent the entire episode talking about creatine and cellular energy. We talked about how creatine helps recharge the battery, but having enough energy doesn't automatically mean the body has everything that it needs to heal, grow, or repair itself. Think about building a house. You can have electricity running to the job site, but without lumber, concrete, and steel, nothing's getting built. And that's where protein comes in. Today, we're going to talk about why protein is one of the most important nutrients in the human body. And that's not just because it helps build muscle, but because it helps build you. We're going to cover metabolism, blood sugar, brain health, hormones, gut health, pregnancy, kids, healthy aging, and probably even answer a few questions you didn't know you even had about protein along the way. And so, Dr. Kala, let's start with the basics. When somebody hears the word protein, what exactly are they consuming?
Sure. So protein is really just a chain of amino acids. Think of amino acids like individual Lego bricks. By connecting them in different sequences, the body can build thousands of different proteins, each with a completely different job. There are 20 different amino acids that humans use. 9 are considered essential because we can't make them ourselves. We have to get them from the food we eat. The remaining amino acids can usually be produced by the body when they have enough of the other nutrients we need. Unlike carbohydrates or fat, we don't have a dedicated storage tank for protein. We're constantly breaking proteins down and rebuilding them, so a steady supply of amino acids every day helps build the building blocks we need.
Okay, so protein isn't just something that we store up for later, it's something that we're constantly using.
Yep, your body continually replacing the old proteins with the new ones. Skin cells are turning over, the lining of your digestive tract is continually renewing itself. Immune cells are being produced. Muscle tissue is repairing after normal daily activity. Enzymes wear out and we need to have them replaced. Protein isn't something that you just use once and you're done with. It's part of a continuous remodeling process.
Right, so I think that's where a lot of people immediately jump to muscles, right? If somebody says they're eating more protein, people assume they're trying to get bigger or stronger, but that's really only one small piece of the story, right?
Yeah, much smaller than most people realize. Muscle is certainly one place protein is used, but it's far from only one place. I will have to say clinically, I'm really guilty of following protein as it pertains to muscle and bone.
Sure.
Again, as we're aging, even for those of us older than Brittany, over the age of 40, it becomes more
Who's that? I don't know.
yeah, it becomes more and more apparent. But for instance, though, as protein pertains, our digestive enzymes are proteins. Many of your hormones are proteins or peptides. Antibodies that help fight infections are proteins. Hemoglobin relies on protein to carry oxygen throughout the body. Albumin, the most abundant protein in your bloodstream, transports hormones, fatty acids, medications, and nutrients while helping maintain fluid balance. Even the receptors in your cells that allow hormones like insulin to communicate with tissues are made from protein.
That's wild.
When you look at physiology, protein isn't isolated to one organ system. It's woven throughout virtually all of them. The fitness industry has done a great job of teaching people that protein helps build or maintain muscle. The problem is that where the conversion often stops. Protein is involved in healing after surgery, recovering from illness, making digestive enzymes, supporting immune function, producing neurotransmitters, building connective tissue, growing a baby during pregnancy, healing after childbirth, and even sometimes preventing postnatal depression,
Nice.
healing after childbirth, and supporting that healthy aging. When you start looking at all of those roles together, you realize protein isn't just really a sports nutrition topic, it's a human physiology topic.
Man, that's cool. So let's take it one step further. If protein is involved in so many different systems, what happens when somebody consistently doesn't get enough? And maybe even more importantly, what happens when they finally start getting enough? Let's start with one of the biggest areas, metabolic health, because I think it's one of the most misunderstood topics in nutrition. When people say they want to, boost their metabolism, they're usually talking about losing weight. But metabolism is really about how our bodies produce and use energy, regulate blood sugar, store nutrients, and really just keep everything running. Protein seems to be at the center of a lot of those conversations now. So, Brittany, why has protein become such a big focus when we're talking about metabolic health?
Because it's like we said, matters for so much more than just muscle.
Right.
One of the first things we talk about, because we have a lot of patients come in and they just don't understand the significance of getting enough protein in their diet. So we have to explain like how it changes how your body responds to just like a meal, right?
Hmm.
So if your breakfast is going to be a lot of carbs, or you're just having, coffee and toast or something like
Sure.
that, your blood sugar is going to spike quickly, and then your insulin's going to spike, and then a couple hours later, now you're hungry and you're tired, you're looking for energy. So now you either need a snack or more coffee to get
Sure,
you through.
right.
And you're only an hour and a half into your day, right? But when that same meal has enough protein, your digestion is going to slow because the food is going to leave your stomach way more gradually. Your
Mm.
glucose is going to enter your bloodstream at a slower pace. So people are going to get that steadier energy throughout the morning. That they're not having those highs and those lows, which is helpful
Sure.
for mood regulation, especially when I'm talking about like kids.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that carbs are bad. So I don't want to tell you like eat only a protein
Sure.
breakfast, right? We need carbs. They're helpful for energy, but just means we need that protein to create a more balanced response to those. So also, protein is one of the most satiating macronutrients we eat. So it's
Mm.
going to keep you full longer. It stimulates hormones like your GLP-1, which we've heard
Well,
a
a lot of
ton about.
conversation about that
Yeah.
lately.
Mhm.
Your body naturally does that. And then
Imagine
peptide,
that.
right? It's like everything that's fantastic is just
Right.
taken
God
from God.
already did, yeah.
This perfect design where this man was like, you know what? I'm going to take that for myself.
Right.
And then also stimulates like peptide YY, which is signals fullness. And that's going to reduce your ghrelin. Your ghrelin that hormone that drives hunger. So eating enough protein is going to reduce those hunger cues. So you're not hungry in 2 seconds after you've eaten.
Hmm.
So this is probably one of the reasons that protein has become such a big topic with those GLP-1s medications becoming so popular. Those are mimicking our hormones, what naturally happens after we eat. So if we have enough protein in our meal, our body is going to be doing that without the
Sure.
medication. The difference is GLP-1s, much higher dose, stay in your body for much longer. So with protein, when you eat it and you have that GLP-1 response, it's a shorter lived response, but it
Hmm.
is still going to give you way more like satiation in that. So you're not starving right away. But obviously still eating protein is not the same as those, but our goal
Right.
is basically just supporting our system.
Right. So that's really interesting because it changes the conversation from, how do I eat less to how do I stay satisfied longer, right?
Yeah, because most people don't struggle because they're hungry all the time for no reason. They're hungry because they're not eating food that's keeping them full.
Right.
So if someone starts their day with 30 to 40 grams of protein instead of like 5 or 10, it's amazing how different that is. And
Hmm.
if we're talking to most of my clients, they're kids and moms. Okay, so
Sure.
I'm not talking to people who are into intermittent fasting right now. Okay, so if you're into fasting, this is not you. But if you wake up and you can start your day early with that protein, boost your metabolism, eat within an hour of waking up,
Hmm.
get some sunlight in your eyeballs. But that's going to help your cravings later on at night. So I know a lot of moms are like, I put my kid to bed and it's snack time. Like I'm so hungry because you've not fueled yourself well throughout the day because you
Right.
put everyone else first all day long. But if we
Mhm.
can start our day with our protein, boost that, then we have more time in our day to fit all the protein that we need, right? Just for a time
And
consistency
that in
point.
itself can be hard.
Yes, exactly. So that is helpful to start your day. You're going to have better, ups and downs. Your cravings are not going to be as crazy. And then you might actually end up eating less of the
Hmm.
carbs and things that you don't want to eat because you've gotten in what you need. But
Or
Pro-
maybe you shouldn't eat, but you do want to eat.
yeah,
I mean,
yes, exactly. Your protein also is going to influence how we preserve lean muscle during weight loss. Okay. So with that GLP-1 conversation, it's really that part kind of gets a little overlooked. We gotta make sure we have enough protein. I think we're going to speak to that in a little bit too. But
Hmm.
if you reduce your calories, but you're not eating enough protein, your body's not just going to break down your fat for energy. It's also going to break down muscle. So that's why
Right.
in our office, we have that in-body scanner that we love to talk about. So we
Mhm.
can like just keep an eye on people's skeletal muscle mass, make sure if we're on a weight loss journey, we're doing it appropriately, right? So, um,
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, that in-body scan really is fascinating to me as well. I was just telling a friend of mine in Arizona about yours and sending him my stat sheet, and then he went to his provider and got one. And I'm going to show you that later because I was really surprised by that. They said he had the best numbers they ever saw, and I don't like hearing that. So I want another opinion. But anyway, losing weight and improving body composition, they're not necessarily the same thing, right?
Yeah, the goal shouldn't simply be to make the number on the scale smaller. We want someone to lose excess body fat while preserving or even building lean muscle. Those are two very different outcomes. Research has consistently shown that combining adequate protein with resistant training leads to better preservation of muscle during weight loss than dieting alone. And that's another piece worth mentioning.
Mm.
Protein has the highest thermic effect of food, which means your body uses more energy digesting and processing protein than it does carbohydrates or
Oh,
fats.
sure.
Roughly 20 to 30% of the calories from protein that are used during digestion itself. So compare that with carbohydrates, where it's closer to 5 to
Oh,
10%,
wow.
and fat, where it's only a few percent. It's not enough to completely change someone's metabolism on its own, but it's another reason protein tends to be such an important part of healthy body composition. And this is a big conversation that we have in our office. We love when a patient is an appropriate candidate for a GLP. There
Mm.
are many people who do need to lose weight, but it's GLP would be an inappropriate.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is somebody that the scale, might say that that they're overweight or their BMI sucks. But if they have an excellent skeletal muscle foundation and low fasting insulin and a really great blood sugar regulation, a GLP is not going to be the best go-to
Mm.
for them. Now we've got other patients that they have way less skeletal muscle mass relative to how much body fat that they have. And if they have a fasting insulin, over 13, that's somebody who's a better and appropriate candidate. But in an ideal world, we try to figure out, well, what's their basal metabolic rate? So we know exactly what they need for
Mm.
calories. We know exactly what they need for protein. And then we always put them on creatine. And then we monitor them to make sure what they are losing is the body fat while maintaining or increasing that skeletal muscle mass. That's
Mm.
what's
That's cool.
necessary in our opinion, so that once they hit their target goal, once we've lost that body fat, then when we pull them off or when they can go off it, they don't have it come pouring back on.
Sure. And that's a big deal with any diet.
Mhm.
People lose weight all the time. And then you often hear, boy, I put back on more than I lost.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's easy to get lost down that track. Now, it sounds like protein is helping from several different directions at once here. It's keeping people fuller longer. It's helping to stabilize blood sugar. It's preventing muscle during weight loss. And even requiring a little more energy for the body to process. No wonder it's become such a central part of the conversations around metabolic health that we're having.
Yeah, that's why we start there with protein with so many patients. Sometimes patients come in and they're asking for supplements for blood sugar, wondering if they should completely eliminate carbohydrates. But before
Mm.
we even get into that, the simple question of, well, how much protein are you eating? Our two favorite apps, there's one called MyFitnessPal or another one called Cal AI.
Mm.
What I like about Cal AI is you can do a free 3-day membership, and you literally take a picture of your food. And it is fairly accurate
Really?
yeah. So I tried it. We were out in Arizona and I had avocado toast. It literally knew I had a half an avocado and 3 eggs,
Really?
and I had some bacon on it and feta, and it literally just from the picture. And so it makes it easier because a lot of times if you have to put in every single ingredient on your food
Mhm.
log, people don't become compliant because it's so much time because we're people of convenience. So I
Right.
like that just because sometimes it just brings in an awareness that sometimes there's an accidental malnourishment that you're putting your body into starvation mode
Yeah.
purely because you're either
Mhm.
carbohydrate heavy and so protein deficient. And so sometimes people will think that they're overeating. It's like, no, you're just not eating the right
Sure.
amount.
Mhm.
But oftentimes I say our office, we see more people underfueling. And then when we
Huh.
have them actually eat more and eat more protein, they're like, why am I eating so much and losing body fat?
Oh, that's
Mhm.
It's
cool.
because you're fueling their metabolism.
Mhm.
Right. So, one thing I've noticed is that the recommended amount of protein has become pretty controversial. And I think we're going to get into that here later in the episode. But it seems like part of the reason those recommendations have changed is because our goals have changed. Now we're waiting to know how much protein helps people maintain their muscles, support metabolic health, recover well, and age well, rather than just survive. Before we get into the recommendations, though, I'd like to shift to another area where protein plays a surprisingly important role, and that's the brain. Most people know the brain needs glucose for energy, but what a lot of folks don't realize is that many of the chemicals responsible for focus, motivation, mood, and sleep all begin with amino acids. Brittany, walk us through, how protein fits into brain health.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the biggest things people don't realize is that the protein isn't just supporting your structures of your body, your muscles and all that. It's also really important for communication within the body. And I lead with this information a lot because I'll have, kids or moms and they'll come in and they're like, yeah, protein, like, if you just is that constant like protein, building muscle, fitness,
Sure.
especially if they're younger people, they're not as focused on longevity because, we haven't crossed that bridge
Right.
yet. And so if you're not focused on that, you're not trying to build muscle, there's like, oh yeah, it's not very important in their brain. So we have to kind of go through all of this history of like why it's important for your kid to get enough protein.
Sure.
And outside of just, we have a lot of them come in for like mood regulation issues and things like
Mhm.
that. But your brains are constantly producing neurotransmitters, and those are little chemical messengers that allow your nerves to communicate with each other. So all your thoughts, memories, movement, emotion, every decision depends on those signals needing to be transmitted effectively, right? So many of those are made from amino acids that come directly from the protein we eat. So
Hmm.
a couple examples. Tyrosine, that's a precursor for dopamine, which I'm sure everyone's heard of dopamine. You get that dopamine hit
Sure.
when you're up, right?
Right.
But that's involved in motivation, focus, learning, attention, like your brain's reward pathway.
Huh.
But it's also used to make norepinephrine and epinephrine, which helps us stay alert and respond appropriately to stresses. Another amino acid, tryptophan, is used to make serotonin, which influences your mood, your appetite, emotions. Serotonin is then converted into melatonin, and that's one of your primary things that help your sleep-wake cycle. So even GABA, which you think about as like a calming neurotransmitter, depends on amino acid metabolism. So all of these things are really dependent on your protein, right?
Sure.
And so we don't always think protein, we think brain health, but it is really important. Now, quick disclaimer, eating more protein isn't going to cure your anxiety or your depression or
Oh, man.
ADHD. But what I can say is your brain needs an adequate supply of these things, right? We can't ask it to do a job and not give us the
Sure.
building blocks. So that may be a very easy first step for anyone struggling with these things. Before, let's just add a little more protein in it and see how things go.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective because I think a lot of people, when they think about protein in terms of physical performance, they think about it that way instead of mental performance.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we encourage patients to stop thinking about it, just as like something to do after a workout. But especially when there's seasons of life when your brain is having to work overtime and you may not even connect the dots because a lot of times when you're in
Sure.
the thick of it, you don't even know like I'm having to work so much harder right now. But if you're in college or you're studying for finals or you have a really demanding job or you're a parent who's been up with a newborn all night, all those things are really times that they're not bodybuilding situations. You're not,
Sure.
growing a human necessarily, or you're, trying to win a competition, but your brain has an increased demand. So a protein isn't going to be a magic solution, but eating enough to get the body the amino acids it needs to produce those compounds is going to help with your brain function. Now, like we've talked about a million times, the body's not, there's a bunch of little individual squares that you're like, here's
Sure.
brain health in one and this in another.
Right.
But so your brain health is going to depend on more, sleep, stable blood sugar, healthy fats like DHEA, EPA, exercise, your iron, your B vitamins, magnesium, all of these things are really important for brain health. Protein is one of the pieces of that puzzle, but it is a really important piece.
Sure. So, what happens when people skip breakfast, grab something quick for lunch and then eat, a large dinner? Most of their protein for the day is on their dinner plate. Does it matter when we're eating our protein from the brain's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, rather than eating like 8 or 10 grams of protein in the morning and then 80 at dinner because you're
Sure.
making up for it, there's an advantage to spreading it out. One, it's going to help give your body a more consistent supply of amino acids, right, throughout the days to help with, tissue repair, immune function, your blood sugar spikes, all of that fun stuff. We also know when you eat a lot at one sitting, it comes less efficient for stimulating your muscle protein synthesis rather than
Hmm.
dividing that amount throughout the day. But from a practical standpoint, it's also easier on your digestive system than asking
Oh,
your body to
sure.
do all of that at once. While healthy kidneys are well equipped to handle that, spreading it throughout the day makes a better sense to allows your body to use it more consistently.
Sure.
So that's why, one, I like to just hit breakfast really hard. It's one of my favorite, like, if we're going to change anything about protein, let's start at the beginning of the day.
Mhm.
Because that I feel like is a lot of the time where people struggle with most, especially because I deal with kids. They literally eating waffles and muffins. And
Mhm.
like, if
Captain
we can
Crunch or
just
something?
Sugary
exactly.
cereals.
So if
Yeah.
we can add, and sometimes it's like it's not even like taking away, it's like adding in. So if
Mhm.
you're gonna have a muffin, give them some protein with that. That can look differently for different families. My kiddos love chicken sausage. We'll do
Hmm.
bacon. We'll do one of my kids just loves smoothies. So we do a lot of protein shakes in the smoothies,
Mhm.
that type of thing. So
Sure.
adding two before we take it away seems to be easier for kids specifically. Grown-ups are maybe a little more
Mhm.
equipped to handle those kinds of changes, but or like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. Those are kind of sneaky things that you can add in that I'll use those all the time. My kids don't like Greek yogurt, but they get it in their food all the time.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I was actually shocked when I realized how much protein cottage
Yeah.
cheese has, and
Yeah.
then how great that is. I mix cottage cheese in with my eggs when I'm scrambling
Yeah.
eggs, and it makes them a lot
Mhm.
fluffier, almost richer. I put it with my steaks.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've talked about protein helping the brain communicate, but communication doesn't really stop there. Every second of every day, hormones are sending messages throughout our bodies, telling tissue when to grow, when to store energy, when to release energy, when to heal, and when to adapt. So, Dr. Callow, where does protein fit into that picture?
Yeah. So when we hear the word hormones, patients, all of us are thinking, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. These are hormones that are certainly important, but they're only one small part of the endocrine system. Many of our hormones are actually proteins or peptides. So insulin is a protein hormone. Glucagon is a protein hormone. Growth hormone is a peptide hormone. Many of these hormones involved in digestion and appetite regulation, including GLPs, which we've already talked about, but even peptides as well. That's important because it reminds us that amino acids aren't just building tissues. They're also involved in the body's communication systems. Even hormones that aren't made from proteins still depend on proteins in other ways.
Mm.
Many hormones travel through the bloodstream attached to transport proteins. Once they reach their destination, they bind to receptors on the surface of cells, and those receptors are proteins too. So whether we're talking about producing hormones, transporting hormones, or receiving hormone signals, protein is involved in multiple steps along the way.
So that's something that people have probably never thought about. When we hear hormone imbalance, we usually focus on the hormone itself, but not necessarily on the systems that allow those hormones to work.
Exactly. So hormones don't function in isolation. And oftentimes patients will come and they'll say, hey, I want to do labs. I think my hormones are off or my thyroid is off and my adrenal is off. And they're not wrong. A lot of the time we can test that and find it.
Sure.
But then we say, but why is that? Why are the hormones deficient?
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
oftentimes it comes back to the diet and the lack of the dietary intake in the first place.
Hmm.
But they're a big part of an incredibly coordinated communication network. And just like every other system that we've talked about today, they depend on this adequate nutrition. And I want to be careful to not oversimplify this. Eating protein isn't going to correct every hormone issue. However, it's really helpful.
Sure.
And especially the younger you are, it actually can create, especially like our teen daughters, and even some of like our teenage sons, that if we get to them just being nutritionally sound and when you do the food tracking, oftentimes when you make that correction, there is a fast correction for it.
Nice.
So hormonal health is influenced by sleep, stress, exercise, body comp, nutrient status, inflammation, medications, underlying medical conditions, and many other factors. But protein provides an essential piece of the puzzle. Without adequate amino acids, the body has fewer resources to build peptide hormones, maintain transport proteins, replace receptors, and support the countless processes that allow hormone communication to occur normally.
So I think that's one of the themes that's emerged really through today's conversation is that protein isn't really just about one organ system. It's supporting communication, repair, growth, metabolism, immunity, and really so many other processes simultaneously. But before any of that can happen, the body has to digest and absorb it because eating protein and actually utilizing protein aren't always the same thing. Brittany, let's talk about digestion. What if somebody is eating enough protein, but they're not digesting it well? Really, when I first came to see you, I think that was one of my issues, and you really helped me with that. So, walk us through what actually happens after we, take that first bite.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people quite don't understand about like nutrition. We spend a lot of times talking about what we eat, but not a lot of time talking about like the actual digestion and absorption of these nutrients. You can
Mhm.
have a fantastic diet like you did, and but if you're not absorbing these nutrients, it's not doing as much good as it can, right? So digestion actually begins before the food ever reaches your stomach. When you smell food, you see food cooking, you even start
Mm.
thinking about it, right? You
Right
start
now it's happening.
salivating,
Yep.
right? So that's the cephalic phase of digestion. Your brain is going to begin to prepare your body for food. Through your vagus nerve, it's going to stimulate your stomach
Mm.
to begin producing hydrochloric acid. Your saliva increases. Your digestive enzymes begin to be released. Your body starts to shift into that phase,
Mm.
which is when we're really busy and we don't slow down to eat. So we're stressed, we're rushing through it, we're eating on the go. We miss that phase and now we're kind of missing out on part of the digestion that's helpful. So
Mm.
um just one, that's why when you sit down and you pray before you eat, that's a great
Right.
opportunity to
Right.
start your digestion is starting. You're being
Mm.
thankful. You can switch into that rest and digest,
I
and
love
then your
it.
digestion is going to work more effectively.
Wow, that's really cool. So, digestion isn't just about what's on our plate, it's also about whether our body is actually ready to digest it.
Exactly. So, and then once that protein reaches your stomach acid becomes really important. And I know this, we're talking about protein, but you cannot not talk about protein without talking about stomach acid
Sure.
because if you don't have enough, it's really,
Right.
really important. But that acid unfolds these tightly folded protein molecules so the enzymes can actually get to them. Without enough acid, you're not going to digest your protein that you
Mm,
need to. So stomach acid also activates the enzyme called pepsin. It's going to start to break apart those proteins into smaller peptide fragments. And in there, the pancreas is going to release some enzymes into the small intestine, and then those are going to break down the protein all the way into those amino acids that can actually be absorbed at that point.
wow. So I think stomach acid gets a pretty bad reputation. Most of the time when we hear stomach acid, we immediately start to think about problems like GERD, acid reflux, heartburn, and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely got a bad rap because that's what does come to mind. But the stomach acid is something your body was designed to produce, and it's essential. I remember when I first started working at Back in Line, and I heard Calla explain this to a patient because you hear of people that have heartburn, and they always just think there's too much, right? So everyone's on PPIs because there's too much
Right.
stomach acid. And I remember hearing you explain, it's like you have so little. Your stomach is working so hard to squeeze, mechanically digest that
Oh,
it's coming back up because it's having to overwork because there's not enough of it there. And that just
hmm.
blew my mind. We tell this to
Yeah.
patients often, and it blows everyone's mind
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's just not what you hear. But you need that stomach acid because its primary job is to break down that protein. It needs to unfold those structures. Otherwise, we're not going to have that,
Hmm.
digestion of it. So we find if people are eating enough protein and we can see in their lab work that it's like it doesn't look like they are, a lot of times we just go back to digestion and be like, okay, do we not have enough enzymes? Do we not have enough stomach acid? This
Hmm.
is an easy first step to figure out what piece are we missing because if someone is coming in and they're actually hitting their protein goals, we're like, this is fantastic. Like
Right.
that's not
Hmm.
normally what we see. So we're like, you're
Sure.
doing the hard work. Why are we not seeing, the
Hmm.
results of that? But beyond that, your stomach acid is also really important for other nutrients. Your iron, B12, calcium, magnesium, zinc, all
Hmm.
those things have to get properly prepared to be absorbed correctly further down your digestion. So, um, having the right amount is important. Most of the time we see that low stomach acid more than excess. Also have a lot of people around PPIs like I talked about. Those are not meant to be long term.
Hmm.
There's like
Right.
I
But
think
they
4 to 8
are.
weeks.
Everybody, I know people that have been on them for 20 years that,
Yeah.
And
uh,
it's causing osteoporosis at
mm,
significant rates. But the manufacturer, if you go to the manufacturer's website, it says do not take for more than 90 days, and most people are on them for over 9 years.
Mhm.
gosh.
And then you have that absorption issue of like your iron, your B12, your calcium, all those things. It's wild. And so we have patients come in who want to wean off them, and then it's a process that you have to go through to get
Yeah.
off
Oh, you
them
can't
because
just come off.
Well,
Yeah.
no,
and some
especially
people I have to put on like I have to put them on acid. It's
yeah.
betaine and pepsin
Hmm.
because they have mechanically shut down and chemically shut down their body's ability to produce acid.
Wow.
Under conventional healthcare for symptom masking, it sounds like you have a reflux problem. Instead of figuring out the cause of your reflux, which
Right.
the cause of everybody's reflux could be very different. You can have H. pylori, you can have a dairy sensitivity, a leaky gut. That all can be repaired and fixed.
Sure.
um, but yeah, we put them on betaine and pepsin, and some patients they have to take 20 capsules just in order to be able to break down and properly absorb and digest protein. The goal is
Wow.
that we don't keep them on that high a dose of
Sure.
acid, but it is a fear factor. They're like, this says it's hydrochloric acid. I'm like, it is, but you need it.
You'll be fine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long? I assume that your system starts to repair itself and will make its own stomach acid after a while, or
Yeah,
no?
it depends from patient to patient. And one of my girlfriends, I was wrong. I assumed that she had low stomach acid, and we were going for a walk run. And they call it like an empiric test. You're supposed to like give somebody a capsule, and then if they feel nauseous, it means you're wrong. It's like the cheap way to do a
Oh,
test. But how you figure out someone's dose is you keep having them take another pill, take another pill, take
sure.
another pill. And then when they get that nausea, you have them take baking soda and water to neutralize themselves because
Oh,
they will get a burny and acid
sure.
reflux symptomatology. No, I was wrong, and I gave my girlfriend 4, and then, like, 5 minutes into the walk, she is like,
Oh,
"I
no.
am so sick," so we had to turn around so we could neutralize her. Thank God she's a friend, and she quickly forgave me,
Right.
but that's kinda how you know, and a lot of people, they assume because it feels like it's stomach acid that they have too much, but
Yeah.
especially as we age, that process already goes down on its like, that's a natural aging progression,
Hmm.
and if you have too low stomach acid too soon, it's actually called a condition called hypochlorhydria.
Wow. It's fascinating. So, what systems make you start wondering whether somebody isn't digesting protein well?
Yeah, so some are digestive. So bloating after meals, feeling like your food's just like sitting in your stomach,
Sure.
belching, early fullness, just basically like you eat a lot of protein and you don't feel good afterwards. You can kind of connect the dots. But sometimes it shows up other ways where it's not as obvious. So having low ferritin, or you're not, despite like, even if you're maybe even taking an iron supplement and you're just not absorbing your iron like you're supposed to be, or low B12, thinning hair, brittle nails, or even poor exercise recovery or frequent infections, fatigue, all those things are
Sure.
outside of digestion that could point toward that. So they don't, poor digestion can absolutely contribute to these.
Hmm. So let's talk about iron because we see iron deficiency all the time. Dr. Kalla, how does stomach acid influence iron?
Iron is a perfect example of why digestion matters. When we eat foods like beef or spinach, that iron isn't automatically absorbed. Stomach acid helps release iron from the food matrix and creates the acidic environment needed for absorption further down the digestive tract. If stomach acid is low, someone can be eating iron rich foods and still struggle to absorb enough iron efficiently. Over time, that can contribute to depleted ferritin stores or iron deficiency, especially if people who have already increased iron needs, like menstruating women, pregnant women, endurance athletes, or anyone with chronic blood loss.
And that's probably why you sometimes see patients who say, I'm eating red meat several times a week, so why am I still iron deficient?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the issue isn't intake, it's absorption. That's why in functional medicine, we don't just ask, are you eating enough iron? We
Mm.
also ask, can your digestive system actually assess it?
Hmm. So, what about vitamin B12? I know that's another nutrient you check quite often.
Yeah, B12 is another great example. Before B12 can be absorbed in the small intestine, it first has to be released from the proteins it's attached to in food. That process depends on stomach acid. Later, B12 binds to a protein called intrinsic factor, which is produced by specialized cells in the stomach. Without intrinsic factor, B12 absorption becomes extremely difficult. So, a healthy stomach function isn't just important for digesting protein, it's essential for absorbing your vitamins as well. And when someone becomes deficient in iron or B12, the symptoms can extend for far beyond digestion. Iron is required for hemoglobin, which
Mm.
carries oxygen to every cell in the body. If iron stores become depleted, people often experience fatigue, shortness of breath with exercise, poor endurance, headaches, dizziness, restless legs, feeling cold easily, hair shedding, and even difficulty from like a common cut or like scrape a wound just takes longer to heal.
Hmm.
B12 is essential for red blood cell production, healthy nerve function, and DNA synthesis. Deficiency can also contribute to fatigue, numbness or tingling in the hands and feet, memory changes, poor concentration, balance problems, and certain types of anemia. I've also seen correlation, sciatic nerve, or like when we have like a nerve pain and nerve entrapment, that patients with B12 deficiency take longer for that nerve pain to reduce. Again, there are many possible causes for these deficiencies, but digestion is one important piece of the puzzle and shouldn't be overlooked. We do have people that their stomach is so inflamed or they have such significant autoimmune that's where like doing a B12 injection or an IV injection where you bypass the stomach itself, get it right into the bloodstream. And so we're healing
Yep.
from more through the blood versus from oral through the digestive tract. So the digestive system is a gateway. If the protein isn't being broken down efficiently, the body has fewer amino acids to work with. And if stomach function is impaired, absorption of nutrients like iron and B12 may also be affected. So that's why we spend so much time looking upstream instead of simply adding one more supplement.
So I think that's a great perspective because so many people focus on the question, what supplement should I take? Sometimes the better question is, why isn't my body absorbing what I'm already giving it?
Mhm.
And I think that brings us to another stage of life where protein needs change dramatically. Pregnancy, postpartum recovery, and childhood are all times when the body's growing, repairing, and adapting at an incredible pace. Brittany, pregnancy is one of those seasons you work with every day. A lot of women know they need more protein, but I don't think many realize just how much work the body is actually doing during those 9 months. Why does protein become so important during pregnancy?
Yeah, pregnancy is probably one of the greatest examples of why it's so much more than a muscle building nutrients.
Sure.
You're literally building another human being, right?
Right.
So all their organs, muscles, bones, enzymes, hormones, all
Mm,
those things and growing and building is being supplied from the nutrients from mom. At the same time, mom isn't just supporting the baby's growth, her own body is also going under these changes, right? It's a
sure.
very dramatic time. But like her uterus is growing, her blood volume is expanding. All of these new things have to be built and maintained. And so every one of those processes requires amino acids.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. So, when you think about it that way, it's almost impossible to imagine protein requirements staying the same, right?
Yeah, and so many years, the protein recommendations during pregnancy were all basically, or the recommendations for anything, right, is all just to prevent deficiency. That's all we've been like
Sure,
focusing
right.
on, and not supporting optimal fetal growth or
Hmm.
maternal health, or even there's a lot of research about like going into pregnancy with strong stores, helping postpartum recovery with
Hmm.
depression, anxiety, all of those things being heavily influenced by this. Um, but women need more protein when they are pregnant. So
Sure.
a lot of times we'll tell patients just it's very much more individualized to this, but a lot of women's like aim for like 80 to 100 grams a day.
Hmm.
'Cause pregnancy, you're gonna want to do like 800 to 120, maybe more.
Sure.
Depending, we if you come in, we'll have a very more a lot more specific recommendation.
Sure.
But it depends on your body size, activity level. But that's a good place to start. Um, Now, if you're eating like 60 grams a day, you don't have to panic and you don't need to up it overnight because sometimes
Right.
that's difficult. But just recognizing that the protein needs to be a priority at every meal is a good place to start.
The morning sickness probably makes that easier said than done, though,
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
imagine.
I am one of the lucky ones that struggles every time.
Oh,
That
good times.
yeah, that just first trimester is just do the best you can. Like,
Oh,
it depends. Some people I have a twin sister, okay?
hmm,
She has not had a touch of morning sickness for a single pregnancy. Like,
really?
no, just,
Hmm.
wonderful. Doesn't have an issue getting her protein. I'm dying. Like, so, there's different hacks. I had a friend text me who's newly pregnant. She's like, "I can't." She's like, "I meal prepped everything. I can't eat any of it." And I was like, it was so optimistic to meal
Yeah.
prep.
Right.
But sometimes it's just doing things like I got those pre-made protein shakes, which are not my favorite thing to have, but I couldn't even do like the grittiness of a protein powder in
Oh,
milk. I was
yeah.
like, even the texture of that was too much. So
Hmm.
you
Mhm.
just literally do what you can. Find the sources of protein that you can eat that you can handle. So like if the sight of eggs just kills you, I did like Greek yogurt was okay for me. I did those protein shakes. I could do some cheeses, things like that, where I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to get my protein in. I switched to using whole milk for things. So it's like,
Sure. Right.
just anything I could do to get it in. And then, or bone broth was a good one of just adding
Hmm.
that in if I was
I hear
going to
that a
make
lot lately. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if I was gonna make a pasta, which because like first trimester, that's a lot of carbs. And I was like, so any carbs I was making, because that's what I needed, I was making it in protein in bone broth to just add a
Mm.
little bit
Oh,
more.
that's cool.
So if like the side of chicken was disgusting, the bone broth was in there.
Yeah. Smart.
So a lot of those because of those food aversions, the nausea, or just literally not even feeling hungry, you just have to be really flexible with that. Cottage cheese, like you had talked about before, is a really great option. You don't have to find a perfect protein source, but just finding ones that you can tolerate during that season. But
Sure.
then after, as you get into second trimester, things for most people are much better. So then focusing on getting it in and, having a healthy diet. But then after delivery doesn't just stop. Recovery, like your muscles, your tissue needs that fuel source to help recover.
Sure.
A lot of times once the baby's out, people just kind of like move on. It's like, no, that, that phase is so crucial for mom and baby.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's one of the most nutritionally demanding times in your life. So it's also, but it's a season where you're taking care of everyone else besides yourself for the most part, unless you have a really good, village, which
Right.
I do, so I'm lucky. But, during that pregnancy and childbirth, the healing after, whether it's vaginal delivery or C-section, your connective tissue is repairing, your blood losses need to be replaced, your hormones are shifting crazy,
Hmm.
your sleep sucks,
Right. Right.
So and then if you're breastfeeding, you're producing milk every day, which requires so much more energy and
Oh, yeah.
nutrients. So that protein helps support the wound healing, the tissue repair, maintaining your muscle during recovery, so
Mm.
important for the milk production. Just one that recovery time is an active process. Your body isn't just resting, it's rebuilding. So you need the materials to help it build.
Right. That makes sense. I think that's a message that more moms definitely need to hear. There's so much more focus on preparing for birth, but not nearly as much conversation about preparing for recovery.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true, especially for like first time moms, because
Mhm.
you've never
Sure.
done this before. You have no idea. You spend months
Mhm.
making the nursery and probably reading all the pregnancy books. I didn't
Right.
read a single postpartum book because that was
Oh,
not on.
yeah.
I was like, "What's the baby's here?" It didn't
Right.
even
Yeah.
occur to me like, "What is that fourth
Mm.
trimester? What does that even mean?" So, but during that time, having easy protein options available, so you can pre-cook chicken. Like my husband will like to grill up a bunch and then we'll freeze stuff so we can
Oh,
easily warm it up. Or you can buy grilled chicken too. Is it
yep.
probably the
Mhm.
best? No.
Yeah.
Is it better than a lot of other things?
Mhm.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
So you do what you need to do. Like Greek yogurt, hard boiled eggs are a good one. Um, I mean, it's wild to eat that at like 2 o'clock in the morning, but sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah.
Protein shakes, beef sticks are a fantastic one.
Mm.
I love those as a quick, like in the middle of the night option, or freezing meals that you made ahead of time. I've seen this be a new thing where people, when you have more than one child and you're not doing baby showers every time now, they'll just do like come over and they'll clean your house and help you meal prep, like your close friends.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
that's
That's the
fantastic.
best
Right.
gift ever.
Yes, you gave me freezer meals after I had my second. Kala did, and it's the best gift I've ever gotten.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
highly recommend that.
So protein is obviously important during pregnancy because babies are growing so rapidly, but growth doesn't stop after birth. How does your conversation about protein change once kids start eating on their own?
Yeah, so it seems pretty similar in that kids are still constantly growing. When we talk about protein
Sure.
for adults, we've talked about mental hormones, but a lot of like longevity, muscle preservation. But for kids, they're literally still building themselves. They're building bone
Right.
and muscles and organs. So and their brains, of course, their immune systems, all of that. So the difference is they just don't normally eat enough protein. I have a lot of
Mm,
kids come in; they're very picky eaters.
yeah.
So they love carbs, right?
Right.
Crackers, granola bars, fruits, all those things. They don't provide enough high quality protein to support the growth and energy they need. Um, I it's hard, like I've said before, to completely remove things for kids. So
Yeah.
a lot of times I'll just make short, easy changes. So if someone's like, my kid loves waffles, cool, add extra eggs in, use whole
Hmm.
milk, protein powder. I'll add those
Hmm.
things in with my flour. And
Mm,
you gotta do it slowly at first because kids might notice right away.
right.
They're not dumb.
They're food critic.
Right.
Yeah, they'll know
Worst
it.
food critics.
Just slowly adding in, making just, intentional substitutions because you can meet them where they're at. And then, as we start to make these changes, they typically, if we go low and slow, kids are a lot
Sure.
more open to it.
They're
But
flexible. Yeah.
they
And
are
depending on their age, having them help with meal prep and
absolutely.
food, if they put their hands on it and they helped cut the strawberries, if they help
Mm,
pull the, like they're more likely to, when
Hmm.
they're
yeah.
involved.
I love that. When our kids were young, that Iron Chef show on
Yeah.
Food Network was really popular, and so it would often be playing in just the back room at our house. And then we came across that they would we had so many food allergies in our home. Y'all were aware of
Sure.
that, and so we had to find ways to get them to eat things that they didn't want to eat. And so we came up with that idea. Well, let's have some competition in here
Yeah.
and see and it was
Yeah.
fantastic.
And it ended up being fun
Yeah, it was a
too.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes what they came up with not so great,
Yeah,
but
sure.
it was all good for you.
Yes.
So it
Well,
was
that
great.
and you're creating like healthy relationships with food, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the most foundational things you can do with your kiddos. I have some teenagers come in who have just horrible diets because and their parents are now starting to try to change it. And you think, oh, they're a teenager. They can understand. They just don't care a lot of
Right.
times,
Hmm.
especially if you have someone come in and they're athletic, they're fit. Like a lot of times teens don't care as much if they're not overweight. They're not having
Hmm.
overt struggles that it's their parents' concern that's bringing them in, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Sure.
And so they don't care to add protein to their breakfast because they don't understand how it's going to affect them super well. So, but kids that are involved in sports and all these things, they need those things because they're still growing, they're still recovering. Strength training is a huge part of being a teen athlete now. So
Right.
all these things are really important. So they're trying to grow and recover. But those small consistent changes, when your kids are little, fantastic because you're setting up for success later.
Yep.
It's never too late to do it. You can do it with your teenager
Right.
and teach them so that way when they are an adult that they can keep those habits because those habits are gonna make a bigger difference than just being, little small habits better than perfection.
Right. So we've talked about one end of the lifespan, pregnancy and childhood. Let's shift to the other side there. Dr. Kalla, it seems like protein becomes increasingly important as we get older as well. Why is that?
Yeah, well, and I just want to define older as 40 and above, not to be offensive, but
So
that's kind of where,
young at
yeah,
heart.
yeah, exactly. And I don't consider 40 old at
No, for
all,
sure.
but according to my teenage daughter, that's old.
Oh, I know.
But really what we see, especially for women around age 40, is that perimenopause, menopause start. And so that's where I'm bringing this into conversation. But older dots and 40-year-olds that are awesome and older are often less active, and they need less protein. The research actually suggests the opposite.
Hmm.
So I've watched in conventional healthcare is that they have normalized what we call age-related decline. We lose bone loss, we lose muscle mass, and we have just accepted it like, oh, that just happens. That's just part of aging. But I don't like that. I don't think we should accept that. And there's not that many things. We don't have to do that many things to prevent that accelerated aging, if you will. But as we age, our muscles become less responsive to the same amount of protein we ate when we were younger. And this is called anabolic resistance. I've had this happen. I remember before I was 40, like in my 20s and 30s, and 40-year-olds would come in and they're like, I turned 40. How did this cortisol belly happen overnight? I
Right.
changed literally nothing.
Right.
this anabolic resistance is it. In other words, the body needs a stronger stimulus, both from a resistance exercise and from a dietary protein to maintain the muscle mass. And that's important because muscle loss isn't just about strength, it's about independence. When we lose muscle, we don't just lose the ability to lift heavier weights.
Right.
We lose balance, we lose mobility, recover more slowly after illness or surgery. Our risk of falls increases, fractures become more common, hospital stays become longer. And once significant muscle is lost, rebuilding it becomes much more difficult. That's why preserving muscle is one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. And then again, what we do in the office, we can make the 80-year-old healthier at 80 years old than she was at 70, than she was at 60. We just have to get the baseline. But I will tell you, what we do in our 40s, if we start making these changes now, then we don't have to worry about it when we're 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Right.
But when we talk about health span, the goal isn't simply living longer, it's maintaining the strength to keep doing the things that make life enjoyable.
Amen.
Carrying groceries, traveling, getting up from the floor, playing with grandchildren, working in the garden, living independently. Those are all outcomes that we're really trying to protect. And even something as simple as getting on and off the toilet.
Yeah.
Protein and resistance training become two of the most important and powerful tools that we have to preserve that independence. And again, I've got some 40 and 50-year-olds now that have knee pain, hip issues, that have a lot of mobility that they can't get on and off the ground unassisted.
Wow.
But small changes, they
Yeah.
can, and it is absolutely doable. So if some people, they might feel discouraged from where they're currently at. A little bit of work, repetitive day in and day out, can actually help reverse that.
I love that. One thing that's become clear throughout today's episode is that protein doesn't, that our needs aren't static. The amount of growing child needs, for instance, isn't the same as a pregnant woman. A postpartum mom has different needs than a college athlete. And those needs continue to change as we age. So that naturally leads to one of the biggest questions that people ask, how much protein do we actually need? Because depending on who you ask, you're going to hear a variety of opinions on that. 50 grams a day, 200 grams a day. I've seen it all over the board. Dr. Calla, where do we even begin?
The first question we need to clarify is that not all recommendations are answering the same question. One of the numbers people hear the most often is the recommended dietary allowance, or the RDA, which is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. So for a 150-pound adult, that's roughly 55 grams of protein per day. The important thing to understand is what that recommendation was designed to do. The RDA is intended to prevent protein deficiency in the average healthy adult. It is essentially asking what's the minimum amount of protein most people need to avoid becoming deficient. And that's a very different question than asking what's the amount of protein that best supports muscle, metabolic health, healthy aging, exercise recovery, and overall health.
That makes sense.
If someone's goal is simply to avoid deficiency, the RDA is an appropriate starting point. But most people listening to this podcast aren't trying to simply avoid deficiency.
Right.
For most healthy adults, that evidence consistently supports anywhere between 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight per day. For someone who's strength training regularly and trying to build muscle, or actively losing weight while preserving lean muscle mass, that range can often increase between 1.6 and 2.2 grams per kilogram. Older adults also benefit from that higher end of that range because of the anabolic resistance that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Pregnancy, breastfeeding, recovery from illness, surgery, or significant injuries can also increase protein requirements as well. So the important takeaway is that protein needs aren't a one-size-fits-all. They're influenced by age, body composition, activity level, and what your body is being asked to do. And I do know too, if there's a kidney disease, failing kidneys, protein consumption actually becomes much harder because your kidneys cannot break it down. So that's a little, this isn't a one size fits all. Some people can't handle this much protein.
Right.
And I think that's why it's important to make sure you're going to someone who knows what they're talking about.
Right.
A family member who's super into fitness and they're doing a really great job, and they were advising an older family member on how much protein. And I was like, hey, bud, she cannot, based on her, I've seen her labs, her kidneys cannot handle 160 grams a day.
Wow, yeah.
I was like, your goals of building muscle, fantastic. She's starting from ground zero. And so making sure you go to someone who's got the full picture of your health and not just, some fitness bro trying to help you out.
Well, and if you do, if anybody does that Cal AI or MyFitnessPal and they do a 3-day food log and find that they're significantly low in the recommended intake, I usually average on the average adult, anywhere from 80 to 120 grams is usually that's my goal or baseline kind of across the board, because majority of people are really undernourishing
Sure.
themselves. So it's well, where they're at from their baseline to try to get them to that point. But let's say you're only averaging 30 to 40 grams a day. Then in the next month, let's try to get that goal to 80. Then the month later, let's try to get it to 100. Stair step it.
Right. So this probably explains why, if someone's training for a marathon, someone recovering from surgery and someone who's 20 weeks pregnant, they shouldn't all have the exact same protein goals, right?
Yeah, nutrition should always match physiology. The more your body is growing, repairing, adapting, or recovering, the greater the demand for the amino acids. One thing I also encourage people to think about is quality over quantity.
Mm,
Not all protein sources provide the same amino acid profile. Animal proteins, things like eggs, dairy, poultry, fish, and beef, are considered that complete protein because they contain all 9 essential amino acids in amounts the body needs. Most plant proteins are lower in 1 or more essential amino acids, which doesn't mean that they're unhealthy. It just simply means that they need to be combined with other plant protein sources throughout the day to provide a complete amino acid profile. And I would say clinically, when I have patients come in that are vegan or vegetarian and want to remain vegan or vegetarian, I'm very open and honest with them that most likely we're going to need to supplement with amino acids,
mm,
because I have not been able to see vegans and vegetarians get
sure.
they would be needing to consume an enormous amount of food to overcompensate compared to what we can get them in animal proteins.
Mm,
So I wish I knew somebody here locally that had better vegan, vegetarian
sure.
support in the integrative and functional world. I just don't feel confident if they want to stay that way that I can help them without being able to supplement with pretty high doses of amino acids.
That's pretty fascinating. So we've talked a lot about total protein. What about eating it throughout the day? Does timing really matter in that regard?
Yeah, it does. One of the biggest mistakes that we see is someone eating very little protein all day and then trying to make up for it in one massive protein dinner.
Sure.
Research shows on muscle protein synthesis, it suggests that our bodies respond best to reaching what's sometimes called the leucine threshold several times throughout the day. Leucine is one of the essential amino acids, and it's particularly important because it acts almost like an ignition switch for muscle protein synthesis. Most adults need somewhere between 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine at a meal to maximally stimulate that process. For most people, it works out to roughly 25 to 35 grams of high quality protein, depending on the source. If you go to any like a GNC or some of these like fitness, and you look at like the fitness recovery, you'll see like leucine, isoleucine with
Right.
caffeine,
Oh,
like a
gosh.
pre-workout and stuff like that.
Everything's with caffeine these days.
Yeah, yeah. But instead of eating 80 or 90 grams of protein at dinner, it's generally more effective to spread that intake across
Mm,
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you're into intermittent fasting, focusing on that window, but still spreading it out throughout that window that you are in your time restricted eating. That way, it gives the body multiple opportunities throughout the day to repair and maintain lean tissue rather than relying on one large protein bolus.
So one thing we've talked about throughout the episode is that protein, it's not just about hitting a number, it's about choosing foods that are going to nourish the body well. That brings us to another question that we hear all the time. Does it matter where your protein comes from? Whey, beef, collagen, pea protein, soy protein. There are so many options. It can be overwhelming and quite frankly confusing. Dr. Kalla, how do you help patients sort through all of those options?
Yeah, our goal is first and foremost focus on food. The more real food we can get it from versus supplementing. But even in our household, we have to supplement in order to get our demands.
Yeah.
So we do want to focus on the fact, though, that protein powder is a supplement, not a requirement. The majority of protein that we would like from the whole foods, like I said, because those also contain the most amount of vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, and other nutrients that just work better together. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, chicken, turkey, beef, fish, seafood, and legumes, if someone tolerates them well, those are the foundation. Protein powders become helpful when life gets busy, appetite is low, someone has increased protein needs, or they're simply trying to meet their daily go through food alone. I use them all the time with pregnant women who are dealing with nausea, postpartum moms who barely have time to make lunch, teenagers rushing between school and practice, and older adults whose appetite has decreased. They are simply a tool, but not a replacement for a healthy diet.
Yeah, I try to, eat well, try to get all of my protein from, the right food sources, but I will use a protein drink in the afternoon, and I'll mix it with my mushroom
Oh,
coffee,
sure.
and it actually makes the mushroom coffee powder palatable.
Sure.
Um,
Better.
but it also, I think, adds that extra, and that's always nice. So if somebody does want to use that protein powder, where do you suggest they start?
Sure. So, for most people, we can recommend, especially if they don't have a dairy sensitivity, but a whey protein isolate. Whey is one of the most well-studied proteins we have. It's a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids, and is particularly rich in leucine, which we talked about earlier, that helps stimulate that muscle protein synthesis.
Hmm.
It's also highly digestible and mixes well, making it an easy option for most adults.
Yep.
Beef protein isolate can be a great alternative. It's still complete protein and works well for many people who need to avoid dairy. We also offer plant proteins that have come a long way over the last several years. We usually recommend blends, a blend. So like it would be rice protein and what's the other? Quinoa. Yeah, or
Pea
pea
or
protein.
quinoa, yeah.
Yeah, that would be in combo to get the amino acid blend. So yeah, the combination that you would need of the pea and the rice protein provides the more complete amino acid profile than one alone.
Yeah, our middle son Owen has dairy related
Sure.
issues, and so he uses one. I think it's actually called Owen, spelled differently, Owyn. But yeah, and he uses it and he enjoys it. I tried it, not such a fan. One thing that's become a bigger conversation recently is no doubt quality. Do you think it matters which protein powders people are buying?
Yeah, so unlike prescription medications, dietary supplements aren't tested by the FDA before they're sold. That means quality can vary quite a bit from one company to another. Some products have been found to contain heavy metals, inaccurate protein amounts, unnecessary fillers, artificial sweeteners, or ingredients that aren't simply listed on the label. That's why we encourage people to choose companies that invest in third-party testing,
Sure.
especially if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, a competitive athlete, or simply taking supplements every single day. Quality matters.
So what brands do you recommend? That's what people are asking right now, and it's echoing in my head. What
Yeah.
throw it out there.
Yeah, sure. So there's Just Ingredients, there's Equip Foods, Truvia for a dairy-free option, and we have done a couple of the Orgain as well. The best protein powder is ultimately the one that somebody enjoys, tolerates well, and will use the most consistently.
Have you tried Garden of Life?
No, is
Yeah.
it good? It tastes
Well,
the
define
taste
good.
profile. Yeah,
I'll say that I'm not a huge fan of any of them necessarily. There's 2 different types within the Garden of Life brand, and sometimes I'll mix them, and
Sure.
that actually is more palatable than just one alone. But I think that's a good option as well. Now, I think it's a great reminder because today's episode really wasn't about convincing everybody to eat protein shakes all day. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. It's about understanding that protein is one of the most fundamental nutrients that our bodies require. We've talked about muscles, but we also talked about the brain, hormones, metabolism, the immune system, digestion, pregnancy, child growth, recovery, healthy aging. Protein touches every stage of life because every stage of life requires the body to build, to repair, and to adapt. One thing I hope people take away from today's conversation is that nutrition doesn't have to be complicated. Before we worry about the newest supplement or the latest diet trend or maybe the newest biohack, it's worth asking whether we're consistently doing the basics well. Sometimes the biggest improvements in health don't come from doing something extraordinary. They come from doing ordinary things consistently. If today's conversation encouraged you to take a closer look at your own nutrition, we'd challenge you to start with one simple goal this week. Make protein a priority at every meal and notice then how you feel. You may be surprised by the difference that it makes in your energy, your recovery, your hunger, and no doubt your overall health. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to share it with your family and with your friends. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. We know how time is so important, and we appreciate you sharing that with us. Until next time, keep investing in the foundations, take care of the body that God has entrusted to you, and we'll see you next week on the Whole Health Podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on Whole Health. If you'd like to learn more about our program, have a question for our hosts, or want to find past episodes, just head to wholehealthlive.com.